Yeah, I'll just let people know that. So, are you on? Or as far as monitoring from a computer? Probably that's gonna be the easiest.
I'll do it.
You wanna do it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, well, everyone, we'll get started. Claire, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
For everyone who's joining us online, or watching this later, or listening to it later, my name is Jonathan Shirley, and we're at the Lead Center for our weekly Conversations with an Entrepreneur. And fortunate enough and lucky enough to have Clare Cook here from Basin Arts, and want to talk about that, but want to talk about how you even decided to do all of this and all of the entrepreneurial things that go into art, because I don't know, of all of the industries, of all the everything, I just feel like the arts is the most entrepreneurial, even though it's maybe the least thought of as far as doing business things and whatever, but like the failure, the create something from nothing, looking at a blank slate and deciding, I'm gonna turn that into art, or I'm gonna look at a stone and think, there's a sculpture inside that I'm gonna go get to. That's nuts and crazy, and like my business brain hurts to think about that, but like that's real. And so, how's that happen? I'm just kidding.
Well, first step.
Step is to getting chiseled.
Yeah.
So just a little bit about you, like how did you get into the arts space?
Sure, well, thank you for having me. I'm from Lafayette originally. I grew up in this community, and dance was really my, gateway drug, so to speak. In this community, I think
3 minutes in, we're talking about arts and already mentioned drugs. Great.
Yeah, right on track.
We
See,
are
step one.
on a good path. We can cut this out, don't worry about it. I'm just kidding.
In
I don't know how to do that.
in this area, I mean, I think it still very much holds true, especially young girls.
Yeah.
If you, are a young child, age 3 to 4 years old, your parents are putting you in some sort of dance education program. I mean, with rare exception, that holds true.
Yeah.
And so I was certainly no exception to that rule. My mother had grown up in Lafayette. She danced her whole life through high school, and she loved it. And so it was sort of a natural progression, like, oh, she's 3, let's start her dance classes. And it stuck. I mean, really, I think as you go as a kid, certainly I think I always enjoyed it, but probably that middle school, upper middle school into high school was when it became way more apparent to me as a child that, like, okay, this is a space I feel confident, I feel comfortable, I feel included, I feel like I can be myself, and I think I'm so grateful for that, because no matter what the thing is that you spend time doing as a kid, I think now as a parent, like, if you can find that thing where your kid can feel that way, like just be themselves and kind of navigate their own path in the way they feel most comfortable, for me that was a dance studio.
That's interesting, because as a kid, it was in this art space that you felt accepted, and the acceptance part of art seems to be there no matter how old you are. Like, what attracts people to Basin? Because it's a space I can feel comfortable. What attracts people to museums? What attracts people to, like, if you can create a space where people feel comfortable to be there, the accepting part almost happens right away.
It comes, I think, they go hand in hand, because as a creative, like, no matter what age, the whole concept of artistry and creativity is self-expression. And so if you are feeling that yourself, if you're feeling like, wow, I can navigate this idea and kind of try and fail or experiment, if you're having that experience, then it makes it that much better and easier and more at your fingertips to understand that the person next to you is also living in their own experience of that, know. And that, I mean, I think that has always been paramount. And even as a young child, like, the artist space for me was where not only I felt more included and more at ease and more comfortable, it's where I experienced the most eclectic, diverse perspectives that I could have ever experienced. My entire life growing up, it was always through an artistic experience. Meeting people from all over the country, meeting people from different backgrounds, meeting people who have completely different creative ideas that are coming together around the same table. But like, from childhood all the way through my adult life, like that, the art has been the thing that puts me in those spaces and keeps me there.
Yeah.
But the people are sort of the thing that is like the truth of it, you know?
Yeah. All right, so you were dancing your way through Lafayette, and did what? How did
Yes,
that come up?
became increasingly more interested in the art form, curious, like reading every book I could get my hands on, like Barnes & Noble opened when I was in high school, woo, big deal. And so, you know, like bought all the books on that one shelf that had the arts books. And just, yeah, like consuming as much information as I could throughout my entire childhood into adolescence here. I really wanted to leave Lafayette to go to school away. I mean, like I was telling you last week, I mean, I think I was also the kid where like the first time you could Google things on the internet, not even Google, I don't know what it was, but
Ask Jeeves.
yeah, like Ask Jeeves, like for college brochures or whatever. And so I was getting college brochures mailed to me, like my parents were like, here's another one, like, are you paying for this? You know, so I really was just so hungry to explode out of my community and just try a new place. I ended up in Baton Rouge. I exploded 1 hour down the road. At the time, like the TOPS program was affording me the ability to still afford college, but just try a different city. And so that's where I headed. A big draw for me in that direction was also at the time LSU had a program where you could, it was called the National Student Exchange. I think they might still have it, but you could pay like LSU tuition, but leave the state and go to a different school for a period of time. Yeah. And so I kind of like circled that and said, okay, that's a way to expand my horizon. Absolutely. So I ended up spending a semester in Massachusetts, the second year of college. And that was really transformative in a lot of ways for me. It was very much like you get matched. It's kind of like you pick your choices, they pick you, and then you get a placement. So I was placed in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is like a very New England, small town, very academic. There were 5 colleges in the area, and I studied dance for a semester over there. I had never lived out of Louisiana, like I had never been in any sort of rigorous dance environment other than my dance studio growing up and my college ballet class, you know, so I was just mind blown in every direction. I think about that time a lot because it was actually the first time where I felt really uncomfortable in my community, but also still very, very comfortable in my dance life. So like the surrounding area of the college was like very, I mean, people were just walking up and making very harsh remarks about me being from the South. They're like, I must be, you know, stupid, I must be racist, I must be, like literally quote, they have AP classes below the Mason-Dixon line, like, you know, like chummy, like judgmental statements. It was, and not just from students, from teachers, like from everyone around me.
Yeah.
So I was like,
spending time, having spent time and being someone for whatever reason. My mom was born in East Texas, my dad's from New Orleans. How I don't have an accent is beyond me, but I don't. And so like being in other spaces of the country and having people say, thinking that they're like being friendly with you, saying you sound intelligent, or you don't sound like you're from Louisiana, which is a giant slap in the face.
Yes.
Like, it's like, just tell me all the things that you actually are thinking. Like,
right. Like legit questions like, wait, do you take a boat to school?
Yeah, exactly.
No, like we have cars in Louisiana.
What's hard is that people would be like, well, you probably hunt alligators. And it's like, listen, most people in Louisiana don't. But I happen to have the dad who works a lot with alligators. And so I had to answer yes to all of their questions that were like, you must swim in crawfish ponds. Yep, do that too every day from middle school. Like, and yeah, so it was quite a answer.
It was definitely like a wake up in a different way, you know. And so that was an interesting kind of rite of passage, truly, as a 20-year-old, to be like, okay, wow, I have to navigate this. And I mean, also reflecting on that now, like, what a fortunate life to not have to like be in that space until I was 20, you know, in a deeper way. But on the other side of that coin, like I was taking all dance classes. That was my entire curriculum. I basically just stacked it. And I was with other peers in that program, and they would just introduce themselves. Oh yeah, I'm gonna, you know, dance professionally. And then they would just stop. They would be like, I was like, are you gonna say anything else? Like, are you also also gonna be a teacher, or you're also gonna be like, have a side hustle. And like, I mean, sure, yeah, we all have that, but like, it was the first time I had been in a place and in a space as an artist where people considered themselves artists, and they just did not apologize for it. And like, my entire thing to me, to be in a space where people didn't apologize for who they were or what they were passionate about. And so I think of that time, like in my college years, that was kind of what I took out of that chapter, was to own the desire to pursue this further, and the belief in myself that like, hey, you're capable and worthy to not apologize for your path. And so finishing up, I came back to LSU, finished my degree, and then at the last year, like I had a dance minor over there because I couldn't major, they didn't have a major. So I was traveling like where I could to do workshops or dancing with local choreographers, getting like my first kind of paid dance gigs in the state, but still wanting more. I decided to apply for a master's program at NYU, and I had a journey getting in, got waitlisted, waiting. I was telling you, graduated college, took a job as a paralegal coder in Alexandria, Louisiana. Lived with my grandparents for a week in the middle of Alexandria, went to a law firm where I knew no one, and learned how to code documents on a computer, like way before remote work was a thing. But I did that because it was an option that you could get hourly work, and ultimately it would be remote work. So I was like, I really don't know where I'm gonna live or what I'm gonna do, but this is a way to earn $10 an hour somehow, so I'll do this first. And I mean, it was an interesting week, but literally the last day of that week, I got an email from NYU, and I was like, oh, I'm in. So it was such a grateful, like the depth of appreciation in that moment. And then actually it worked out great, because then I got into grad school, moved to New York, and then I already had a remote gig. So I could earn a little money in the midst of grad school. But yeah, I got into NYU. I did a 2 years master's program in dance. So like, I really was hungry for a more academic experience in the field, since I hadn't gotten that in undergrad. And I knew nothing. I mean, I was the youngest person in my class. I had never lived in New York. I like spent that 1 3-month semester in the Northeast. I was very informed about the dance community that I received in Dance Magazine and what I had read at Barnes & Noble, you know, and like the little bits that I had learned along the way. How I got in, I'm still shocked but grateful. I mean, I was just a sponge. I mean, it was just anything I could go to, any talk, any performance, any lecture, any class. I was just, I mean, doing everything I could, and the learning curve was huge, but it was also like my entire world opened up. I mean, it was just an incredible experience of validation, challenge, a lot of self-doubt of just like, why am I here? Like, should I be here? But then kind of having to like prove to yourself first, and then ultimately your community, that you have a purpose to be there. And that was it was a really exciting time. And at the time, the program, like most of my faculty were working professionals that had come up in the industry. I had a lot of teachers like well into their 60s and 70s. So I was just learning from these like deep welled resources of the dance. Like I was learning dance history from the people that were writing it, you know? And I'm incredibly grateful for that time. So that was kind of what got me out of Louisiana for the long haul. I stayed in New York for 10 years and really did everything under the sun. After NYU, kind of ended up working as a performer in like what some might call like the downtown dance scene, or sort of like the avant-garde dance performance world. But then simultaneously, through NYU, I had met a lot of colleagues who were writing new original musicals, because our literal buildings were next door to one another, so we would share the sidewalk, and I met a lot of them. And their graduate program, they were like, there was 17 people that would graduate, and they each had written a new musical every year. So they would be like, okay, well, we're now gonna do our first production of this show, we need a choreographer. So I almost did like 2 or 3 more years of what I would say like an extended grad school education in collaborative multidisciplinary devised musical theater because I had loved musicals growing up. I mean, like, you know, every artsy kid does. You love Broadway or whatever, you watch all the shows. And I was really always a passionate choreographer. Like, that was kind of the thing that I loved, even as a young child through grad school. But I had never really created in the musical theater discipline. What I loved about that path was that it wasn't just like showing up and saying like, here's the script to My Fair Lady, now go create the dances for it. It was saying like, here's something that literally has never existed before. Here's a script that was just written. It's never been staged. We have no idea how we're gonna tell this story. And so I really became an integral part of developing the idea. Like, how does it look? How does it feel? How does it move? And that part of my career, but also like my development as an artist, was so transformative because it put me consistently in spaces with a ton of different disciplined artists.
You're probably touching different. So you would have set people, and you'd have visual art people, and you would have
costume designers.
Yeah, and then you have the people who put the script together, and they anticipated it to be this way, but
yes, yeah. And you're doing it like typically I would be the one hired to do their first laboratory production.
Yeah.
So like, talk about a startup gig, you
Sure.
know, like
Sure.
you're like, this is the budget, you have a short amount of time, you have to find the best talent you can for the least amount of money that you have, and like you have to sell out, because if you sell out and you get a lot of attention, then that's how the show is going to book their next production.
Yeah.
So some of the shows I worked on like went all the way to like Broadway or like, you know, major productions at Yale and like all these like big things, but I was the one that got to move it first.
Yeah, and
So,
oftentimes as being the person who moved it first, you are also setting the foundation for like, if they keep going, whenever the next choreographer comes in, the first thing they're going to do is see what you did.
right.
You know, like, you had nothing, which is hard and wonderful. They
Absolutely.
at least have something to look at, but there's an amount of pressure in being the person who like
Yeah,
lays the
I
foundation
think
for
that
this other person's.
That theme is a big like thing I think that follows me. I seem to always be interested or accidentally the one who does it first, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm the oldest in my family. You know, my specialty in musical theater was doing it when no one had done it before, you know? So I feel like that's kind of, even on the darkest days where you're like, why? Why didn't I choose the thing that could be so much easier in a way? But like, in the truest sense, I think my entrepreneurial journey or my life journey, honestly, the spaces that excite me the most are the ones that are the unknown.
Absolutely. Yeah,
For sure.
like you're
Yeah.
blazing a trail and leaving something for people to follow, and it's not fun. It just is.
It just,
you know, and it's the beautiful way that
it's
like
the space I always gravitate towards.
Absolutely.
So I think at this point on the other side of life where I am now, it's like understanding that is also a space of acceptance, and you say like, okay, well, that's my thing. So,
yeah, and I think that
okay.
and for entrepreneurs and for the different ways that it gets talked about. I mean, you know, Brene Brown talks about vulnerability in the same way. It's not good or bad; it just is, and it's integral.
Yeah.
You know, and so blazing a new trail isn't positive or negative. If there's going to be a new trail, then it has to. Someone has to go.
It
you
is
know?
what
Like,
it is.
Yeah, exactly. It is
If-
what it is,
if
and,
you
and
keep-
then how you decide to look at it becomes everything.
Everything,
You know,
yeah.
it becomes, do I see this as a whole bunch of impediments that can't be done, or I just see this as a challenge that is just like any other challenge and can be accomplished through insert whatever skill set I might need at the time. You know, it's interesting to hear. You know, one of the things that comes out in all the different parts of your journey is the sponging. So when you were in middle school, it was reading all the articles, and then Barnes and Noble opens and reading all the books that are there. I think it was a short trip because there's only 3 books, but like read all those books that are there, and then you get to the university, and it's like, okay, well, let me soak up as much as I can. Then I'm going to be a part of this national exchange program, which randomly, so there's a national exchange program, and then there's an international exchange program. And so I took advantage of the international exchange program at LSU also, and it was incredible. This isn't a podcast supporting the national exchange program, but if your kid has a chance to do it, you can pay the regular tuition and go somewhere else,
It
and
is.
all of your scholarships apply. So like,
Yeah,
if you're
I
paying nothing,
always
you continue to
tell-
pay nothing, and you get to go somewhere else. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I
crazy.
always tell like college students or high school students that are like discerning
Yeah.
their path, I'm like, check out if this is an option, because it was literally a pivot point for me
Sure.
as a young person, and
Sure.
there's no way I could have afforded to do it
Absolutely.
without that
Yeah.
program.
And there's different, like, depending on your budget. Hey, some people are super fortunate and can go and travel abroad, do whatever. But for some people, it might just be, hey, like, I'm going to spend 2 weeks in New York.
Right.
I'm going to do a week in Chicago, whatever it might be, and how it starts to open up. You know, whenever you were in, we talked about this last week. Whenever you were in New York at NYU, there was a moment that's sort of like, hey, I might be good at this. Like, because I think all of us have those moments, whether we're starting something out, whether we're opening up a skill set that we're teaching, and so that's my company, or I'm cooking, or there's a moment where it's like, I might be good at this. That sort of helps.
Yeah, I think even though I was the youngest person in my grad class, I had also come from a degree program that was not the arts. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I had done a minor or an undergrad in mass communication, public relations, and they had just opened like the arts administration program at LSU, like literally
Yeah.
the first four classes I was in them,
Yeah.
you know? And so I came to NYU, and there was an opportunity to apply for like a graduate assistantship, which very fortunately I was able to get, which was also kind of this shocking moment, because again, very young, very green, but the job was like administrative production management, and
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I think I can do that. And then because I had this administrative experience from a different degree, I started getting like freelance work as an arts administrator for all of my professors who were producing their own dance
Yeah.
shows in New
Yeah.
York City, you know? So I was the greener like performance person, you know, because I hadn't been in that professional dance environment as an undergrad. But what I did have was like some skill set on how to make a budget or like
Yeah.
do some marketing. And so, yeah, so I was starting to freelance as an arts administrator to kind of support myself coming out of grad school. And a lot of my first jobs were with my professors who were producing their own shows. And even one in particular I'm thinking of, at the time, there was a program which was basically a dance administration lab. And
Yeah.
it was like kind of like what you guys do. Like it was like a business accelerator for dance administrators, and you could apply with a choreographer and an administrator. So this professor, basically I was paid by him paying for that lab. And then we went through it together, and it was a crash course in managing dance, dance administrative work. And
Yeah.
so that became another big piece of the survival mechanism, but it was kind of like, well, I think I'm good at this, so let me just kind of keep learning it. And I also think I'm in a community that a lot of people don't have this skill set but need it.
Yeah.
Because I was working with a lot of creatives that didn't have any sort of business background. So I just kind of kept leaning in, because I thought, well, someone needs this, and it's a way to provide a support. But also I think what is unique about that relationship, for in my experience, was that I would continue to also be an artist and a creative. So to have an administrator that also is entering into that space from an artistic lens, that is still in the act of being vulnerable, making, feeling scared and proud and confused, like, you're also not only bringing the administrative stuff, but you're bringing the human side of being an artist, which it is all, it's all the things, you
But
know?
all of that, I think the leaning in part it really touches on the entrepreneurial mindset that we talk about so much, and it's a good visual, because if you work from a space and from a mindset of leaning in versus leaning out, because you can do either one, and it takes courage to lean in. But being in those spaces, hey, listen, you're the youngest one, you come from Louisiana, you come from, there are lots of reasons for you to not get the position. There are lots of reasons why no one would be unhappy or disappointed if you didn't even try.
Yeah.
Like, because no big deal. Like, would not have been like, hey, yeah, you probably need more. And those are the spaces and the times, I think, for all of our entrepreneurs, of you can talk yourself out of it. Or you can say, actually, but I have these skills that might be different. And therefore, I'm going to lead with those. I'm going to lead with these other skills that actually, these other people who have only danced their whole life don't have.
They need that support,
and
right?
So,
yeah.
And so for from a mindset standpoint, it's, do you lean in and use the things that you have to go get what you want, or do you look at an opportunity and say, well, they probably won't pick me because of blah blah blah, right, and therefore I'm not going to get in, and all those things. And
yeah, it's I think it's so nice to reflect back on that time, honestly, through this conversation, because I think it's such a reminder of the nimbleness of that period and the openness of that period. I think as we age, we are continuing those same patterns, but we're in deeper, we have more responsibility, so I think it's so nice to reflect back on that, to take that in and say, okay, now in this moment, like, where am I leaning in?
Yeah.
And where am I not?
I think about the same thing when you talked about, like, reading everything you could about whatever and diving into how often as we grow up do we not do that? Like if we're going down rabbit holes nowadays, it's generally something related to social media, and
yeah,
it's not really helpful.
It's not
like we dove in, but like, why? Like,
yeah, right.
Versus as an adult, I'm really interested in this. I'm gonna learn as much as I can about that. Like, and I think that is something that separates, whether it's entrepreneurs or just entrepreneurially minded people, the willingness to dive into something that we don't know and learn more and do that as an adult. Because you're right, because like as a kid we do that, and then at some point along the way we get busy. I get, like, I don't want to pretend like that's not part of it, but
yeah, I think
we forget how fun it is.
Yeah, I think there's a moment right now that's very, I'm grateful for this shifting in my own mindset or my own space. So I think Basin Arts is now in its 8th year as an organization, and sort of like all the things that come with establishing something that is sustainable and consistent. And there was like pandemic in there and like a couple of pivots, but it feels like, okay, this is this thing that is like, for the last 8 years, so much of like the creative muscle that I have innately has been poured into the building, the making, the shaping, the supporting, the visioning of this space. And like, that will continue, but it is in a more, it's more robust than it was as like a seed, And so now, like, for the first time in quite a minute, I'm kind of like siphoning out Basin Arts and Clare creative artists again, because I think that, like, also I had 2 kids in the last couple years, so like that was just like all we did, So it was a bit of a bubble. Building an organization, all of that creative energy was also coming out from like making dances and putting a lot of creative art together through Basin and everything. Pandemic, a couple kids, that kind of all just got compressed. And so I think now I'm finally feeling like the space away from the pandemic, the kids are getting a little bit older, like it's kind of stretching out again, and it's a little bit more clay-like. And so I'm excited because that exactly what you just said a moment ago, like re-understanding and like coming back into the view of like, okay, dance making, artistic perspective, like being with an idea and kind of letting it like stretch and simmer, like that is like the same feeling as like reading all those books, you know, and it's a space of learning and discovery, and you don't exactly know what it's going to be, but that's kind of like the best part. And so I feel like now I'm excited because I feel that that energy is still very much alive with Basin, but I have more people. You know,
Yeah.
It's not just me. Like
Absolutely.
there's more of a team and more of a support system, and the community is more engaged. So those types of things aren't only coming from my generative energy. It's an infrastructure for everyone to have that bubbling up. And now I get to sort of like also spin this plate a little bit in a good way.
Yeah. So 10 years in New York, you come back, and so Basin Arts is birthed out of what? Like, what's the problem? So
Yes.
Places exist to solve problems. So like, what's the problem? Yes.
Well, I came back in 2016, 15, 16 timeline. The time my husband and I got married in New York, he had a job offer and like family was calling us home. I admitted that, you know, I was not super excited to leave right when I was leaving, because I literally like was leaving where I finally had gotten, like I was working in Broadway rooms. I was getting gigs that actually paid me livable money. I was like working with Susan Stroman, Tony Award winner, you know, like assistant choreographer. Like it was just like, oh,
You had made it.
Made it, whatever.
Kind of,
but it was like, I felt so valid, you know, like I felt like, okay, all of this work, like I felt really, like I was finding momentum after all of that time. All of that to say, we decided to come home.
Where no one understands.
Where nobody understands anything.
And there are lots of people who go, oh, that name sounds fun.
They're like,
I don't know who that is.
So the first year that we moved home, I was still working on a touring production in New York. So it's kind of like the best situation, because I had a paycheck and I had a gig that allowed me to move home, but like at least once a month they were flying me somewhere to check in up, like to put a new dancer in the show, and like it was like this perfect split screen existence, because it gave me 6 to 9 months to kind of say like, okay, what do I want to do with this town? You know, like, do I want to dig in, or do I, because I could have kept getting more contracts that would have just kept me on the road. So it would have been like, okay, Lafayette's where I rest my head, but then I like get paid and I travel for work, like many artists do, you know? So I kind of was like experimenting and like imagining all those different paths. And then once I had spent a year or so of that time, during the midst of that time, I was still working on this traveling show, but I was able to produce a show here in Lafayette, like at the middle part of 2016. And that split screen existence was it became very clear to me after that moment. Like, I want to dig in. And I kind of said, okay, eyes wide open, like, if you're gonna stay in this community, and which, like, my husband and I are both from this community, like, our families are here, we kind of just knew, like, all right, if we're here, I mean, never say never, but like, we're probably gonna be here.
People will be real mad if I leave. And by people, I mean parents.
Yes, all that. So it felt like I had to go in and say, all right, like, do you want to be here? Own it. Build it, you know, like build the reality that you want to live in, and do it step by step. And so Basin Arts basically was kind of that first step into that new reality. And it was always going to be, from day one, a space that could support multiple disciplines of artists and really build community from the inside out, and be a space like I felt as that adolescence, like be a space where you can be yourself and feel connected and vulnerable and creative and like unfinished in a way, all under one roof. And so that was kind of our first tagline before we even had a mission statement, was like a container for creativity. And the name Basin Arts, you know, it references our geography at Lafayette Basin, but it was more important. There's a quote from Women Who Run with the Wolves. Do you know that book? Clarissa Piccola Estes. It's a beautiful, beautiful book about women and just life
Wolves
and everything.
And running.
Wolves, yes, it's awesome.
Sounds fantastic.
But there's a quote. I was reading that book at the time that this was happening. I'd read it several times, but I was reading a section of that book, and she talks about creativity as the flow of creativity. and we aren't intended to hold it forever, but it is, the flow is what comes in and out of our tributaries, and she says our basins and our pools of existence. And the idea is that for Basin Arts, I was drawn to that, the duality of that word, because I think people know it as, oh, it's Louisiana, you know, but the idea that it is a container not intended to be rigid, not intended to hold forever, but it's a space that can support you and hold you as you're figuring it out and you're in the flow, but it is always intended to keep flowing, so that whatever you're feeling supported, digging in, making, connecting at Basin, learning, the idea is that it's a fluid thing that you take with you wherever you're going to go, whether you're going to go to a bigger stage or you're going to go to your family or you're going to go to your community. It's not meant to be rigid.
Yeah, I love that. I just love that, because I love thinking about how things have to be fluid and have to flow. And so much of
life. Yeah.
I mean, that, and like, as someone who just loves culture to death, like culture is so often thought of as these like rigid rules that like define a group of people and things like that. And yet, like when you look at culture, so culture comes from Latin cultus, and cultus is cultivation and growth and change. And so truly, culture is meant to be adaptable and malleable and fluid, and something that you that you strive for, but not necessarily attain, because it's going to change. And just when you think you've obtained it, it changes. And so you go in knowing and thinking and with a game plan of, we seek this culture, we seek this great thing, knowing we will never accomplish it, and yet we seek anyway.
Right.
And that's the point.
That's
the point is you
the
seek.
process.
Yeah. Like, I also want to go like not way back, middle back, I don't know, whatever. So you mentioned like deciding, like, am I going to do this? Am I going to do this? If I want to do this, I got to do it. You know, and so entrepreneurs have that moment all the time, especially if they have, you know, I mean, any relationships they have, whether it's friends or parents, but spouses. What was that like? Like, hey, I don't know if we're gonna, we may need to move back to New York. Maybe like what was that like in the moment of? Because that's real.
It was real. It was real. I think, like, I have the most incredible partner. Like, I feel so supported and loved. And throughout that process, that never wavered. But the journey to like have a shared acceptance around this new reality, I mean, we had to dig into that, you know, like it was deep conversations, a lot of tears on my side, but I cried at the Barbie movie, so, you know, I cry all the time. That's not that big of a deal. But like, truly, like for me, I had to go through a grieving process, like, to be honest, you know, like for my own self, like it was grieving a path that I had been on for a decade and sort of like felt momentum.
Well, you say decade. It's a path you've been going since you were like 3.
Right. But yeah,
this was a long, well-trodden path.
Yes. So I think changing that path, like for me to be in a space to say, okay, I'm ready to dig in. I'm here, eyes wide open, in Lafayette, as an artist, as a supportive, administrative brain, like all the things. Like, I had to grieve that path, you know? But that's the funny, awesome thing about life. Like, that had to happen for me to accept this. Yeah. But now, like, it's been almost another decade, give or take, you know, and when I reflect back on the amazing opportunity, the gifts of this community and the gifts that Basin Arts has provided me in terms of people, opportunity, like authenticity, like majorly, it is the space that I can be authentic within my hometown. Like, a lot of people don't have that, you know, so I am, the gratitude continues, and I think it was perfect. It was what needed to happen, you know? Because that, I guess, is kind of a theme, the split screen for me, because I can't just let go of something. I gotta do all the things for as long as possible until the world's like, you have to let something go. So like the first year of Basin Arts, I also like was still kind of getting these choreography gigs where it's like, oh, you're gonna go
fly somewhere
and do this fabulous thing, you know? And so I kept saying yes to those, because I was like, still, like, I'm now 2 years into Lafayette, and I have this organization, but now I'm finally getting those calls. Well, I shared this with you last week, like, the final straw, no shame to Footloose the musical, but I had like accepted a summer stock choreography gig in upstate New York, and it was like this really well-known regional theater.
It was a town that didn't like music, and you had to go in there.
Yeah, I mean, and it was like, I had been recommended by this Broadway director, you know, it's like, oh, well, I have to say yes to this gig. This is like so cool, you know? And so I left Basin Arts, like the first full summer after I started Basin, like the first full summer of Basin, I moved out for 2 months and went to Cortland, New York to choreograph Footloose the musical. And I was like, I am miserable. Like, what? This is the most, no offense to Cortland, New York, but like, this is so
just throwing a lot of people on the bus right now, that's all right.
You know, like, I hope they're all listening. But I was like, okay, clear, got it now, like, got it. I'm so bored. Like, it's a great show, fun music, but this is not my thing. Like, my thing is doing the thing that's something from nothing, you know? And like, everyone has choreographed Footloose the musical. It's a great show, but it was just kind of like, okay, this is not my thing. And I'm here by myself in an apartment, taking beautiful walks in 45-degree evening weather, you know? And all the people and all the things I want to be digging into are hot and sweaty in Louisiana, and I wish I was there, you know? And so that was a real eye-opener. And again, like another turning point just to say, okay, show up, dig in, be present. And I think that just kind of has continued to define my time here now, like 8 years in.
The support part of Basin is something that I really appreciate and enjoy, and some of it because you said, like, or you've told me, probably, I'm gonna say every artist has someone at some point who does something for them that allows them to continue, that does something. And so for you, like, you had someone who did that for you, that none of this happens if they don't step in. And so like, and so now you get to do that for other people. So like, what was that? Like, what was the thing that for you was like, you're not sitting here if this doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is humanity, you know, like we all give and receive where we can, hopefully, and those moments, if they're small to somebody, they're huge to someone else. Like I shared with you last week, I mean, like growing up, there was a chunk of time, like adolescence for me, that was right when dance was becoming like the space where I felt the most comfortable. There was a real financial hardship in my family, and that it was kind of on the chopping block, you know. And my teacher, God bless her, I just talked to her, it was her birthday a few days ago, Carol Delbert, I love her. She offered me free tuition, you know. I mean, like she afforded me the ability to keep dancing for a significant amount of years, and I mean, I was indebted to her, but also like I would assist her, I would do things around the studio, I would choreograph extra things. I mean, it was like the ultimate learning curve, you know, but that was a gift that I received, like to be able to keep going. And so that has never been lost on me. I feel like in small and large ways, I am always looking for how can what I have, what Basin has, what is the resource that can be shared, because we all are functioning in a collective. Sure. And how can we share what we need with other people who need it? I think for me as an artist, and I think that now extends to Basin Arts, like the way that I think about art and sort of the ethos to me of being an artist and art making is that the art is the thing, it's the vehicle for connection, for social change, for communication, for empathy, but like the art is the thing that makes the community. And now, I will say there's a lot of artists that like are social practice, like community-driven artists, and there's a lot of programs out there that support that. But to me, I personally, I feel like it can skew all the way over where it's not about the art at all. It's about the community. Community is very important.
Yeah, of course.
For Basin Arts, I truly believe that if we as an organization and as a broad region, like if we support the artist in the purity of their vision with the support to get their vision to the community, like it's kind of, we're working at it from all angles. So we're maintaining the integrity and the like the purity of the creative process. We're not skewing the process to check a grant box or whatever. We're giving the artist space to experiment and breathe and discover in an untethered kind of way. But we're also providing them programming support, administrative infrastructure, community programming that helps them to take the purity of their craft and give it the why, like take their why to the people that surround you. So then it becomes relevant to the community, whatever, you know, however you think about that broadly or specifically.
Yeah, it's a Basin, it sounds like Basin truly exists for the artist.
Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with like community situations that exist for the community's betterment also, which is needed, but
we are artists first. Like we are from the artist first with the belief that when you are supporting a professional, thriving, artistic community of artists, that community is a change, like can catalyze and mobilize broader community change.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to take a moment to open it up to questions or thoughts or whatever. I can fill the time, or I can ask more questions. I've got like 3 more that I'm thinking about, but anyone, just open it up. Thoughts?
What was your why that you kept on going whenever you left New York?
Well, I think in a very like foundational way, that human need to feel at home in your own body and in your own space. So I think that first why was like, well, I'm here now, and my existence is to make things and to connect to people. So that's what makes me feel like me. So I think that was the first thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that...
I have a question. It's not a 2-part question. I don't know if you said what the mission is for Basin Arts right now, and then kind of what, like, when you moved back, you knew you wanted to do something. How did you like figure out what you wanted to do specifically?
Thank you. So the mission of Basin Arts, I'll probably muck it up because, you know, it's like a mission statement sentence, but the gist of it is that we are an arts incubator to support artists first in their creative process and connect that creative process to the broader community. So that's it in a nutshell. And the how to decide what to do, kind of going back to that musical theater laboratory experience, I knew that, well, a couple things. I knew I wanted to be able to have a dance community for adults. So like where adults could take dance class that were like seeking to continue training, not only recreationally, though that happens also. But you know, if I'm in my 30s and I want to be able to make work and choreograph on professional dancers, is there a space to do that? So I felt like that was kind of like one bullet point. And then I knew I wanted to have a space that could house multiple artists simultaneously so that that exchange could happen. And so Basin started primarily, and still remains true, like visual and performing artists. So there's a long history in the dance and visual arts world of dancers and visual artists sharing space. I think that their space needs kind of work out. So dancers need a big open room, visual artists need a big open room with some walls in between. But like the sound could exchange, and there was a lot of easy collaboration. So those were the kind of the 2 disciplines that began Basin Arts, for an interest, for an ease of collaboration, and also for practicality. It was like the space that we had It's like, okay, how many different things can fit in the space that we have, and that was kind of decided some of the initial programming. Yeah. Yes.
So how was the reception when you first started? Because I know sometimes when something's new, specifically in Louisiana, it takes, a lot of persuading for people to take that step and actually get involved. So how was that process, and then what did you do along the way to keep them there at Basin Arts?
It's an ever-evolving answer. I think the initial reception was exciting and very positive, always really positive. Exciting and also kind of confused, like, this is so cool. What do you do? I still get that question a lot, and I think, but I kind of considered that a positive, because it was like, all right, well then we're charging into that unknown territory. I think because Basin is always evolving, like part of our foundation is to always be fluid and flexible. I think we're consistently like not only reinventing, but we're also like reestablishing how we talk about what we do, or how we communicate better about what we do. We've had an interesting chapter, because I feel like the first 3.5, 4 years of our operation was really like heavy on like offering dance classes and making dances and like doing like a lot of like physical things. And then COVID came, and really like the entire landscape, not only of how people do business changed, but also just like the performing arts industry changed. And so I feel like there's kind of been 3 chapters. There's been like the pre-COVID, the like during COVID, where we still did a lot, but it was like these very quick pivots of like, okay, right now Basin Arts means you take dance class outside. Right now Basin Arts means we do Instagram interviews, like it was just these little like short pivots, because no one could plan more than 6 months out. And then now I think we're kind of hitting the next, dare I say it, stride, but hitting the next moment where it's like, okay, I think we know more about what we're doing. We've like simplified or condensed it too, like focused it in, I guess, a little bit more on that mission statement, and how are we like doing the business accelerator with you guys was really like a clarifying point of like, hey, we are artists first, like, because that is what sets us apart from other things that are already happening in this community, which the arts are so, in many ways, so supported and vibrant in this community, and there's so much like synergy. So then you have to say, okay, well, what is this organization contributing in a very specific way? And I think when I sat with it, through my business plan, did my homework and everything, that was like a big aha moment for me. It's like, okay, Basin is for artists first, to get to community. But if we can, validate, motivate, accelerate the artistic process and provide artists in our community sustainable ways to thrive, then their voices can be more seen, heard, accepted, visualized in the community. So I don't know if I've answered all your questions, but thank you for asking.
There's lots.
Yes. Yes.
So there wasn't, or maybe there was, a business model for you like this. Was there something like that here or even somewhere else? Because your passion, of course, is dance.
Yes.
But you've created this environment across the disciplines, right? And at the end of the day, it's a business.
It is, yes.
So has it met your expectations as a business with the really, I think, very idealistic goal of being this space for creative thinkers, makers, performers, and doers, all those sorts of things? There's a question in there, you got it.
Yes, I think there's a couple. In terms of business model, I mean, yes and no. I felt like the first couple of years, I was like, it was coming truly from that creative, like, experimentation, where it's like, okay, the rent is this much. And like on my notebook, like if I teach this many classes and have this many people, I can pay the rent, right. And like, we'll figure it out, And so I think there wasn't like a hardcore business model, but I knew from my life in New York and kind of just researching in the lead up, I knew of like dance spaces that like functioned in sort of the class and rehearsal model, and I also knew like art studios. And so I thought, well, in Lafayette, like, could we combine those two things, not only from a synergy perspective, but from like a just business perspective, and kind of like basically make the space support itself so that the people can be inside of it, and that was basically where we started. I mean, I think, again, every chapter of Basin has kind of warranted different business needs, and I think some really cool programs have come out of that. I mean, we built something called the Bare Walls program, which is an art subscription model, which is a very business-driven program. That literally came out of a conversation with artists. In one of the early years of Basin, it was like an open forum, and it was called Artists Let's Talk About Money, and we were just discerning all the challenges of sustaining a life in the arts. And one of the things that came out of that conversation, which was a known, was just how few galleries there were in this town, how there was a very lacking commercial art market, like a lot of people weren't purchasing art, and a lot of spaces were asking artists to put their work up for free for exposure. And then from the business perspective, there was a lot of business people that were saying like, oh, we love the arts, we really want to support the arts, but they just didn't have a tangible way to do it. So that program just kind of built bit by bit out of, here's a need, here's a program, and in this one program, we can provide validation for artists, sustainable, income earning potential for artists, connect more local artists to the community by literally seeing their work and making a personal connection. And it's also a sustainer for the organization. Like it kind of checked a lot of things, but that's something that, certainly came out of midway, like, okay, first, artists first. What do artists need? Okay, how do we connect this need and create a solution? Yes. Hey, Nicole.
Do you do a lot of goal settings and keeping your momentum on right now? What books do you read, as well as just keeping all of this going constantly every day?
Cool. Yes. Goal setting, yes and no. I feel like there was a long period of my life, like more before children, to be honest, like where, I could set goals all day long. Like I used to have them on my fridge, like in category. I mean, it was just like, perfect, like goal perfection, visualization, all of that. Now, day to day, moment to moment, did we get out the house? So there's a little bit of that happening, but I think I share that because what this current chapter in life is teaching me is there is a space to set goals, and it's more of a mental space, not so much a writing space at this moment. But I think I'm in a point where I'm also trying to like learn and listen to that self-talk where I'm trusting myself, like it is about striving and goal setting and looking ahead and visualization of like what's to come. Like that is an important part of being an entrepreneur. There's also a part where I felt like there was a chapter or a chunk of time in the midst of Basin where I felt like I was always walking into rooms, to classes, to settings, and just having this running voice of like, you're not good enough, basically. Like, you don't know what you're doing, like you're not prepared, you didn't prepare enough, everyone else more prepared. And it was like paralyzing, And so there was something that I started to trust differently and say, hey, you are prepared. You have done this every day for so long. Like, trust that, know it, And so I think, I don't know if that's a goal or just kind of like a mantra at this point, but it's, that is what I go to on a more frequent daily basis. And it is also practical because I don't have a lot of prep time to think ahead in many ways in this moment in life, yeah.
Any books?
Books. Well, this is an oldie but goodie. Like, do you ever read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert? I mean, it's pretty old now, but that's always like an easy, quick read. And it's about creativity and sort of owning your own voice and taking risks and challenges. I think it applies to anybody, not just the artist. And I don't think she has it anymore, but at the time there was a podcast that was like going along with that book, and you could hear people's like personal experiences with their own life journey in that book. A lot of podcasts, honestly, again, it's kind of like a life moment for me. I love How I Built This by Guy Raz. I mean, like, that podcast is so fun. But he now has the Great Creators, which is like a podcast talking to different artists. Yeah.
So related, if you like that one, there's another one, I think it's called The Economics of Little Things. Like, so then it's just snippets.
Okay,
you know, but it's like, there's an episode on like what happens to used hotel soaps, like,
oh wow,
and it's like there's a person who made this whole business out of used hotel soaps that not only give back to, like, it's a non-profit, but it's also a for-profit thing because hotels got to do something with it. So like that's random, but like, if you like that one.
Yeah, and Rick Rubin has a new book out about creativity, Creative Life, or creativity. But it's really great. It's like also you can listen on audio, so I'll put that on sometimes because it's little short snippets.
Okay.
Mostly people's stories. That is always what motivates me, is other people's stories, because it's just a very human experience. Like, it's not theoretical, it's a lived experience.
They're much more connected to it.
Exactly. You don't feel so crazy.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, great, awesome. Yeah.
I think in that note, I think that the human story aspect, just like you sharing about walking into those spaces and over again, that's, again, as we talk about, like, hey, there's entrepreneurship in a nutshell. It's walking into spaces where every time you're like, I don't belong here. There are people way more successful. There are people who know more. There are people who, like, but you're there.
You're there,
but you
right.
are there. And so if I'm gonna be here, might as well be fully here. And every time you show up is one more time in the future that you can tell yourself, but I did that, and I did that, and I did that, and I did that. So why do I think I can do this? Because I did all of that.
Right, and it's remembering that. Like,
Absolutely.
when you go in that room and you're like, it's saying, oh no, but hold up. I have that mental memory of physically, like, I stood on this stage, or I delivered this thing, or I succeeded at this project, whatever it is. But like, putting it, for me, it's like putting it in your body, going back to your body. Like, I remember there was a project I did. I was still living in New York, but I had gotten commissioned by the Acadiana Symphony to produce a version of Stravinsky's Firebird, and it was very exciting because I was bringing New York dancers to Lafayette, and it was kind of like a homecoming in a way, but I was so nervous. I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I've been away, no one knows what I've been doing, and now I have to build this thing. And during that entire process, I just kept visualizing, because it was on the stage, the Hyman Center, which is like, I performed on that stage so many times as a kid, so like, I knew that space very well. So I just kept visualizing at the end of that show, like, meeting the dancers on stage and like taking a bow on that stage. Because I was like, I know what that floor feels like, I know what that looks like, and I just kept putting that in my body. And so then when it did happen, and I made it to that point, it was such a, like, it felt like a very warm space, because I had put myself physically in that space in my mind. And so I think, like, going back to goal setting or visualizing, for me, like, I know a lot of people journal, and there's that voice. I'm always like, oh, I should journal. Like, the writing part is so helpful.
I'm really good at buying journals.
Yeah.
Man, nobody buys a journal like I do.
My
Like,
computer bag
opening
right here.
journals is not like planners too, calendars.
You should
I can
see.
purchase one like the best of them.
I've got a great collection
They're
of
all still in
empty
gift wrap.
journals. But what I have come to appreciate and, like, accept about my own process is I'm a mover. So for me, it's actually not always writing. It's like moving on the dance floor, or getting in my body, and that kind of tricks the system. Or it's like, if I'm in my body, I can understand something, and then I honestly after that, then I can write so much faster, you know. But it's like coming at it from the back door, the body door.
And one of the techniques I have whenever I have those little voices that come, I just have some charts words with myself, just shut them.
Yeah.
So you just have to talk to yourself.
Yeah.
a little
It's
bit.
like,
Just like,
yeah.
but you're just reminding yourself that like,
Yeah.
you know, because that little voice just keeps talking, like,
It's like-
and until we shut the voice up entirely, like.
Yep. It won't
like,
ever
to
go away,
its
but it's
head.
like, hey,
No, and sometimes it's there to make you go, wait a second, like, is this, because you talked earlier about like trusting your gut, trusting,
Yes.
like, and that's such an entrepreneurial thing, of just like, trust your gut, like, this doesn't feel right,
Yeah.
I don't know about this, but you're being contracted by, or a company wants to give you a contract, you've never heard of them and not sure, like, there may be an element of like, am I gonna get paid if I do this? Like,
Yeah.
like
yes,
yeah.
there is a fair amount of all of it
Yeah.
in trusting
Yeah.
your gut. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
It shows
And
up because
that's,
it's like,
yeah, that's a tricky negotiation when you're building something. But it's always talking to you.
Yeah.
You just have to listen.
It's 108.
Oh, wow,
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you so much. This
thank
is
you.
wonderful. If you've never been to Basin Arts, I guess you can go visit. I don't know. I went one time, and it was awesome. But look at all the other things that you do. Thank
Yeah,
you for this story has been great. I think that blending entrepreneurship and creativity, and just at the end of the day, it's just journeys, and people's journeys are they just never get old.
No, they're always so different, but they're always so similar.
Absolutely.
You know?
So next week, we're going to be talking with Nicole Johnson, who is here, by the way. You guys can't see her because she's behind the camera. But she started like 100 different companies, seemingly a farmer, and co-founded farmers markets and CPR to go and all kinds of others. So that conversation will happen. That's it? There has to be more. But it's
There's
like
another one to
it's
come.
like 6 farmers markets. All right. Anyway, she'll tell you what you should be planting right now. How about that? Well, that can be a question. So that's what we'll be at next week. Thank you so much for either watching or listening or being here, and we'll see you everyone next week. Thank you again.
Very fun. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Me too.
No, we're on the same.
Hey, Clare.
Over there. I was over there.
I'll text you later. Oh, yeah. Okay. Out of context.